Imagine waking up in the morning and the first thing you feel isn't the warmth of the sun or the smell of coffee, but a burning pain in your hands. A pain so intense that you can't close your fingers to hold a cup. You look at your own hands and they seem like claws, enemies that refuse to obey. This was the reality for George, a 72-year-old retired carpenter, a man who built his life with his hands and now watched them become his prison. He didn't know it, but the cause of this daily torture was hidden in a food that he and his wife ate every single day, believing it was healthy. For George, his hands were the story of his life. They held the memory of the first piece of furniture he ever built, the roughness of countless planks of wood, and the gentleness with which he held his children for the first time. Even in retirement, his sanctuary was a small workshop in his backyard, smelling of sawdust and varnish, where his joy was to create intricate wooden toys for his grandchildren. But that story began to take a dark turn. The pain started not as a shout, but as a whisper, a persistent stiffness in his fingers each morning, a silent protest from his joints. He would dismiss it with a grunt, telling himself, "It's just the cold," or "I overworked them yesterday." It's the price of a life of hard work. A real man endures it. His wife, Lucy, saw the whispers he chose to ignore. "George, your knuckles are swollen again. Why don't you let me put some warm compress on them? Why won't you see a doctor?" Stubborn and proud, he would pull his hands away. "It's nothing, Lucy. It will pass." But it didn't pass. The whisper grew into a constant, throbbing conversation. The pain became a low, burning fire that smoldered within his joints day and night. He began avoiding the workshop. The tools that once felt like an extension of himself now felt foreign and heavy. The simple act of holding a tiny screw became a monumental task, often ending with the screw dropping to the floor and him cursing in frustration. The deepest sadness settled in when his granddaughter, with innocent eyes, asked for a new wooden birdhouse, and he had to look away and say, "Grandpa's hands are too tired today, sweetie." He wasn't just losing his hobby, he was losing a piece of his soul, the very essence of who he was. The crisis wasn't a sudden event, but a slow, agonizing crumble that culminated in a moment of profound humiliation, shattering his armor of pride. It was their 50th wedding anniversary. Their children had booked a table at a fancy restaurant. George put on his best suit, the one he hadn't worn in years. He struggled for 10 minutes just to button the shirt, his fingers feeling like clumsy, useless sticks. He was determined to have one perfect, pain-free evening. In the middle of dinner, the waiter presented a celebratory bottle of wine. George, wanting to be the man he always was, the patriarch, took the bottle to pour a glass for his wife. And then it happened. His grip, weakened by the constant inflammation, failed him. His fingers, stiff and screaming in protest, simply gave up. The heavy bottle slipped, crashing onto the table with a deafening bang. Red wine exploded across the pristine white tablecloth, splashing onto Lucy's dress like a wound. For a heartbeat, the entire restaurant went silent. Every eye turned to their table. George's face burned with a shame so intense it felt like a physical blow. He stared at his trembling, traitorous hands, and a wave of pure hatred washed over him. They were useless. As Lucy, with her infinite grace, began dabbing the stain and reassuring everyone, "It's nothing, really. I'm fine, my love." George felt something inside him break. This was no longer about physical pain. It was about the utter loss of dignity. It was about feeling incapable, a clumsy old man, a burden. The car ride home was shrouded in a silence so thick it was hard to breathe. Later that night, for the first time in their 50 years together, Lucy found him on the dark porch, his broad shoulders shaking as he wept, not from the pain in his joints, but from the pain in his heart. The pain had won. The fortress had crumbled. The following day, a heavy gloom settled over the house. George was a ghost, barely leaving the bedroom. That's when Lucy walked in, not with pity, but with the quiet fire that had sustained them through half a century. She sat on the bed, gently took his swollen hands in hers, and said, "George, I married you. I married your strong hands and your kind heart, and I refuse to stand by and watch this pain steal the man I love. This pain is a bully, and we don't back down from bullies. We are going to fight this, together. I don't know how yet, but we will find a way." George's turning point didn't come from his own depleted strength, but from the unwavering promise in his wife's eyes. That single word, "we," was the lifeline he desperately needed. He was no longer alone in his prison of pain. He had an ally. The fight was now theirs. That very afternoon, their home transformed into a research center. They decided that before surrendering to a lifetime of prescriptions and limitations, they would become detectives and understand their enemy. Their investigation revealed a shocking truth. George's pain was a constant, raging fire in his body, chronic inflammation. And they discovered that the gasoline fueling this fire was, to their disbelief, in their kitchen. The healthy food they ate every day was a poison for his joints. Together, they developed 5 steps to extinguish the flames. Their first major breakthrough was identifying the hidden enemy at their breakfast table. They learned about a protein called gluten, found in the whole wheat bread they ate daily, which for many people can act like sandpaper on inflamed joints. The first step was the hardest. They cut out all wheat. The first few days were difficult, filled with cravings. But by the end of the week, George woke up and noticed something remarkable. The morning stiffness was just a little less severe. It was the first glimmer of hope. Next, they investigated their pantry and found another culprit in plain sight. They had been using common vegetable oils like soy and corn for everything, not realizing these oils are packed with omega-6, a compound that, in excess, is like throwing kindling onto the fire of inflammation. The second swap was simple and immediate. They replaced them all with extra virgin olive oil and a small amount of coconut oil, which are rich in firefighting compounds. Lucy then discovered that their spice cabinet could be an arsenal. She learned that nature had its own powerful, built-in anti-inflammatories. Turmeric, with its golden anti-inflammatory agent, curcumin, became a staple, always paired with a pinch of black pepper to boost its power. Fresh ginger, known for its soothing properties, was added to teas and meals. They were not just adding flavor, they were strategically fighting the inflammation with every bite. The fourth target was the sweet poison. As a diabetic, George relied on artificial sweeteners in his coffee, believing it was the responsible choice. Their research unveiled a darker side. Many of these sweeteners can disrupt the delicate ecosystem of the gut, which in turn can trigger an inflammatory response throughout the body. The solution was a gradual retraining of his palate, embracing the natural, subtle sweetness of foods and using a tiny amount of pure stevia only when absolutely necessary. Finally, they addressed the foundations of healing: hydration and gentle movement. They learned that dehydrated joints are stiff and painful joints. George made a new habit of keeping a large bottle of water by his side all day. And even when it hurt, Lucy would gently guide him through simple exercises, like soaking his hands in a basin of warm water with Epsom salts, slowly opening and closing his fists. The warmth soothed the ache, and the movement acted like a lubricant, breaking the vicious cycle of stiffness and pain. 3 months later, on a Sunday morning, George's granddaughter walked into the workshop. The rich smell of freshly cut pine wood filled the air. On the workbench, a brand new wooden horse, sanded to a perfect smoothness, was waiting for her. George was there, a wide smile on his face that Lucy hadn't seen in years, holding the toy out to her, his hands steady and strong. He hadn't magically become a 20-year-old carpenter again, but he had reclaimed his passion, his dignity, and his joy. George and Lucy's story teaches us that we must not accept pain as a life sentence. It shows us the power of questioning what we eat and the strength of fighting together. If you or someone you love suffers from pain and inflammation, and their journey has given you hope, Become part of our community. Write in the comments, "No more pain." Let's find the path to a life with more movement and joy together. Don't forget to subscribe and share.